How's it going, guys? In this video we're going to be talking about the removal and reinstallation of the wheels on your Ninja 1000 or Z1000SX. This video is going to be focused on the removal and reinstallation of the front wheel, but you can check the link above or the link in the description for the video on how to remove and reinstall the rear wheel. The first step with the wheel removal is going to be to get your bike up on stands. And if you're just doing the rear wheel, all you need is a rear stand, but remember that if you're taking the front wheel off, you need to get the bike up on the rear stand before you put it up on a front stand. You never put the bike up on a front stand by itself because it's not stable. In terms of tools for this job, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to need a 6mm hex, a 14mm hex, and then a 12mm socket. We're going to start by taking off the wheel rotation sensor, and that's with the 6mm Allen bolt right here. Next, we're going to take off the calipers by taking off these two 12mm caliper bolts on each side. You want to avoid letting the caliper hang from the brake line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this bolt back in, and this will just help keep the caliper out of the way. And then I'm just going to use this zip tie to hold the caliper on that bolt. That way it's not resting on the brake line itself. Now we're going to follow the same process to remove the caliper on the right side. Now we're going to loosen the two axle pinch bolts. These are just on the right side of the bike, and these use a 6mm Allen key. And these don't need to come out all the way, they just need to be loose enough that they're not pinching down on the front axle. Next, we're going to loosen the front axle with a 14mm hex, and this is on there pretty tight, so make sure that everything is steady. You might want to put some pressure on the handlebars while you're pulling up on the wrench to get this off. To get the front axle all the way out, you want to use one hand or maybe your foot underneath the front tire to help take some of the weight off the tire. Otherwise the weight will make it difficult to pull this out. You also don't want the tire to just drop out when you start pulling on this. So I'm using my right hand to hold the wheel up into the fork. And I'm working this out. And then now the front wheel should just drop right down. All right, now we're going to reinstall the front wheel. Before we put the wheel in, we need to put a little bit of grease on the front axle. And what you do is you start about 1 centimeter in after the threads, and then you go about 3 centimeters more than that. So we're going to put grease kind of right in this area. And I'm just using a white lithium grease. So just like that. And then we'll set this down. The front wheel has a spacer on each side, which looks like this. It was probably stuck in your wheel when you took it out, but you might have taken it off, or sometimes they'll fall out when you're pulling the wheel out. But anyway, we're just going to stick this back in. The ones on the right and the left are the same, so it doesn't matter. And you just press this back in to the rubber like that. All right, I just put the one in on the left side. And to make sure that you have your wheel positioned correctly so that it's in the right rotating direction, you'll just want to make sure that your wheel rotation sensor is on the left side of the bike. It's to my right now as I'm facing it. But this is where the wheel speed sensor is, and then this is the disc that corresponds to that. So that's how you know which is the correct side of the wheel. All right, now we're going to line this up with the fork and try not to lose the spacers as we go in. Okay. And then I'm sliding the axle in from the left side. And then you'll need to make sure that the other side is aligned so that you can push the axle all the way through. All right, so you want to get the front axle threaded in a bit by hand first, just so that you know you're not cross-threading it. And then we're going to tighten it with the 14 millimeter. And the torque spec for the front axle is 110 Newton meters or 81 foot-pounds. Now the service manual says to wait to tighten these down until you can put the bike on the ground and compress the fork a few times. Apparently that's to make it so that everything is seated in here. But when you do tighten these down, the torque spec is 20 Newton meters or 15 foot-pounds. All right, next we're going to put back the wheel speed sensor and remount the caliper. So the wheel speed sensor just slides right in here. And I'm just going to clip off this zip tie. The torque spec for the wheel speed sensor bolt is 25 Newton meters or 18 foot-pounds. The torque spec for the caliper bolts is 35 Newton meters or 26 foot-pounds, and that's the same on both sides. All right, and then you'll just reinstall the caliper on the other side, just like you did with this one. All right, so now that the bike is down on the ground, we're gonna compress the fork a few times. Apparently that helps this all get seated, and then we'll tighten these down. So I'm just holding the front brake. And then the torque spec for these is 20 Newton meters or 15 foot-pounds. All right, that's it.